Welcome to Carl and Heather Present,
the podcast where we dive into the insights, challenges, and humor of being married to someone who is nothing like you.
Are you ready?
Let's go.
Oh, don't you know it's Carl and Heather Present Marriage Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Carl and Heather Present. We are coming to you from International Podcast Headquarters, HQ, ladies and gentlemen, located within the palatial confines of the Carl and Heather Present compound in beautiful Franklin, Tennessee. Man, I feel like
That was amazing.
That was good.
That was so good.
Well, thank you. I always say what's up to you on this.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's kind of a dumb thing to say.
Because you already know what's up.
Because I know what's up. Well, I mean, we have been together most of the day.
So we're asking, like, you're going to ask me that, even though you know, just so that the listeners think.
I'm asking it on behalf of the listeners.
On behalf of the listeners.
I wonder what Heather's doing, they thought.
Okay, well, if you're thinking what I'm doing, I am getting ready for a big conference that my friends and I put on every year, and it's February 8th. It's called Behold Women's Gathering. I'm so excited about it. I hope that you guys will come. No, you girls will come. I don't hope that you guys will come.
It's for women only?
It's for women only.
Why did you do it that way?
That's just the way I do it. So It's going to be awesome. So anyway, yeah, tell us about it, babe.
Behold Women's Gathering is in Franklin, Tennessee. It's
Yeah.
on February the 8th. If you want to register for it, it will sell out because there is so many awesome women that are going to be there contributing to it. Spincha Baker leading worship, Caroline Saunders, Shannon Scott, Jenna and Zoe, April Cushman, and not the least of which you, Heather Carty, is going to be teaching and doing an amazing thing there. So registration is open right now, but it'll close soon because it's going to sell out. So please go to beholdgathering.com.
Yeah, and one of the things that happened, thanks for that. That was very nice, babe.
You're welcome.
One of the things that happened as a result of that is I wrote a Bible study, and it was a humbling experience for me because I'd never done anything like that before. But I felt like in that process of planning and dreaming, praying with my friends, the Lord was doing something in my own heart, and it was transforming me to realize that the only way I could become whole was to behold Him. And so that's the title of the Bible study, Beholding Jesus, Becoming Whole. And you can get it anywhere you buy things, Amazon mostly, carlandheather.com. And I think it would make a great Christmas gift.
I believe it would make a great Christmas gift. I'm a huge fan of yours, but I can objectively say, based on how many people have told us how much they love the Bible study, that it's making an absolutely huge impact. Even for Spanish-speaking people, it's been translated into Spanish. So if you need a Spanish version of it, that's available to you.
That's fun too. So let's
right.
get into some listener comments.
Listener comments. I've been wanting a little listener comments song.
Oh, that would be good.
Listener comments.
Oh, did you see what I did there?
It's kind of sad.
Well, I know it needs to be.
Listener comments. These comments will be sad. No. Listener comments.
I like that better.
Okay. Boy, I'm really into that chromaticism. All right. Listener comments, just a couple things going on here today. From YouTube, our friend Michael Klein 5303 says this: love the transparency in this. You've done parenting right! Exclamation point. Wow, thanks, Mike. I don't know how much time Mike has spent around our kids, but we are proud of our boys. Yeah. And Mike was talking about our episode that featured the boys, our Thanksgiving episode where we talked about gratitude. And we went around and asked each of the boys what they were thankful for or how they had seen the goodness of God working. And Ezra actually opened up, got pretty raw, talking about some relational tension that he and I had and how God helped both of us humble ourselves and work through that. And that's what he said. That's where he said the goodness of God was on display in his life this year. So it was really sweet. So Thank you for saying that.
That was great.
Michael Klein, 5303. We also had a little poll that we just did on Instagram about another episode, or based on another episode that we had done about language stuff. And we asked people if it was woof your food down or wolf your food down. And we have separate Instagrams. So I have a following, and they said 53% of my followers said woof WOOF, and 47% said wolf your food down.
Yeah. So different for me. Mine was flip-flopped except for higher. So 62% of my followers said that wolf, WOLF, was correct. And only 38% said woof.
That's a Trump Kamala.
Here's what I think. I think that no one knows. No. And these results let us know that nobody has a clue.
Rages on.
Yeah, we don't know. So anyway, if you're listening, one of the best things that you can do, most helpful things for us, is to rate and review our podcast wherever you listen. Follow, subscribe to the channel. It's free, but it can help your marriage.
It's an investment in your marriage.
Absolutely.
That's what we're here for.
Absolutely. So, but before we move on, babe, tell us what's been going on with you.
I want to give an update on something we talked about a lot on the podcast, and that is Thanksgiving Miracle Breakfast. Thanksgiving Miracle Breakfast is Thanksgiving morning. You've heard us talk about it in the announcements. If any of you have stuck around till the end of the episode, we've talked about it. It happened, of course, on Thanksgiving morning, and it's where we cook breakfast for as many of our friends and family as want to come. This year, we had 128 people in our home, in our yard, and spilling out into our cul-de-sac.
Yes.
And we had 128 beautiful miracles that we shared breakfast with. And it was amazing. We had so much to be thankful for just in looking around our house and seeing so many people who've been so kind to us over the years, so many friendships. And I love Thanksgiving Miracle Breakfast because I have gotten to meet my friends' family. You know, the moms and dads of my friends over the years, I have learned, I have had the opportunity and the honor of meeting them. So I just love it. We had a great year, unbelievable year. So much to be thankful for. So that's what I was into.
Yeah.
What I've been into.
And that's a good segue into what we're talking about today, because we're actually talking about meals and tables, right?
Yes.
We're talking about around the table and how we build relationships one meal at a time. But before we do that, I think there's some interesting statistics that you have about eating meals together around tables.
Yes. Here they go. Statistics, Tom. As of September 2022, 91% of parents surveyed noticed their family was less stressed when they shared family meals together. That's cool.
Yeah.
84% of adults wish they could share a meal with loved ones more often. In 2022, a study conducted by Dialogues in Health Journal.
Oh, I get
I'm
that.
sure that's a real screamer of a
On
read.
the reg.
Yeah. For girls, better family meal environments at age 6 predicted an earlier bedtime, lower consumption of soft drinks and sweet snacks, more classroom engagement, and fewer behavior problems by age 12. So, especially for little kids, it makes an impact. You know, when you have a consistent meal time and a good experience with a family meal, it helps you later on. Same study looking at little boys said by age 6, it helped with an earlier bedtime, less anxiety, and more pro-social behavior by age 12, which for the parents of sons, you're looking for pro-social behavior.
Yes, we are.
Antisocial behavior, it comes natural.
Right.
We gotta straighten them jokers out sometimes.
Yeah.
Finally, having a television on during dinner has declined over the past decade, which is a plus.
Yep.
I like that. 2009, people said it was always on, like 90% of people. But then in 2021, not as many people had the TV on during dinner.
I don't know about that one. That's the only one I'm curious about, because I wonder if that did not just transition over into phones. So like we turned off the TV because people don't watch their TV, they watch their screens now.
Right.
And instead of watching screens together, we watch them separate now.
Surveys say there's less TV, but then they didn't ask about how much phone you're looking at.
Right. And
how much scrolling are you doing?
I'm not a big fan of either.
I've been on the wrong side of your thoughts and feelings about televisions on and phones at the table a couple times.
No phones at the table. We used to sing a song, No Toys at the Table, and the boys would come to the table with their toys, and now it's switched over to no phones at the table. Anything that inhibits interacting with each other at the table is prohibited. So screens, all screens, that kind of thing. And so I don't love that. I don't love any kind of screens at the table. And so I think the problem with all these, numbers don't lie. These are statistics. These are just numbers, whether you agree with them or not. They are the numbers. And so we have less margin because our lives are busier. Our lives move faster. So we forfeited some of the things, or maybe one of the things that Jesus placed at highest priority when he was living. But even throughout the Bible, throughout the Old and New Testament, we can see that gathering together around tables was of utmost importance. And so we've kind of put that by to the wayside. And so we need to figure that out.
Yeah. I have a lot to say about this. I wrote a song about this because I grew up on every Sunday afternoon after church. I went to church in Gastonia, North Carolina. My grandparents lived in Blacksburg, South Carolina. So we would drive all the way down 85 and we would go to their house, and we had, hundreds of times. We had lunch at their house. And one meal at a time, I was blessed by my grandparents. They were just common, ordinary people, but they gathered their family for a meal. And in doing that, that's how I learned to live life and learn to follow Jesus. And
I love that. Yeah. And you wrote a song about it.
I did. It's called Around the Table.
How would I listen to that song if I wanted to?
I'll play it for you if you want me to.
How would everybody else though?
I see. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, everywhere. It's called Around the Table.
Around the Table by Carl Carty.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I talked about Jesus and meals. There are a lot of examples, Old Testament, New Testament. Tell us about some of those. Like, what are some examples of Jesus having meals with people in the Bible?
Jesus did some of his best work around meals. Like, he was not playing around when it came to food. You got first miracle, hot take right out of the gate, wedding at Cana, turns the water into wine. You got feeding the 5,000. You got the meal at Emmaus, which we'll circle back to, but is my absolute favorite Bible story. Breakfast on the shore, last thing in the book of John, John 21. It's a beautiful picture of a meal that after Jesus is resurrected. He cooks breakfast for his buddies. I love that. Feeding of the 4,000, different time, different place, same kind of thing. Jesus went to Zacchaeus' house to have a meal.
He's going to his house today?
Yeah, it's a famous song. Mary, Martha, Simon the Pharisee, that's a famous tax collector, or a famous Pharisee, a religious person Jesus ate a meal with, and that's where the woman poured the perfume, the expensive perfume on Christ's feet. There was a religious conversation that happened there. It was really cool. And then Jesus ate again at Matthew's house, a tax collector. So a lot of what's to be learned about Jesus' ministry and what he thought and felt can be learned by watching where he ate, who he ate with, and the setting that he kind of helped to create with his ministry around tables.
Yeah. And I think a good question for us to ask today is, why did he do that? Yeah. So we know that he set a precedent for us because it's all throughout Scripture. Even in the Old Testament, people gathered together in meals, celebrations, festivals. Always. That was a huge part of Jewish culture.
It's all about food. You need food.
And so now, for us today, modern day Christ followers, why does that matter? And so we've taken a couple of these to talk about. And so let's start with the wedding at Cana. You mentioned that one as the very first miracle ever recorded in the Bible. Okay. So you can find it in John 2. And what happens, if you're not familiar with the story, is just Jesus, the wedding guests run out, or the hosts run out of wine, which they're serving to all the guests. It's a big problem. And so Jesus' mom comes and says, hey, you need to help us here. And he ends up turning the water into wine.
Not just any old wine, but especially good wine.
The best, right? And so the idea here, I think there's a lot of things that we can draw from this, but the idea here is that miracles can happen around tables. And I think when I think about our marriage and our lives, sometimes I think it has to be this big thing that happens to change us. But in the simplest of forms, Jesus wants to meet us around our table, and he wants to change us and transform us. He wants to do a miracle in our lives around our tables. But oftentimes we're so busy that we don't even sit together around tables. And so for the husband or wife listening that might think, we've not connected in a long time, perhaps you just need to have dinner. And it doesn't need to be anything fancy, but Jesus can meet you and do a miracle in your heart around tables. But you have to sit around the table first for him to work and to do that.
We might look for miracles in the sense of like, I need to see a burning bush, or I need to see the Red Sea parted, or I need to see some grand thing. But what you're saying is, it's not necessarily true. The environment for a miracle, it doesn't require as much as we might think it does.
Right.
We just need to be on the lookout for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So miracles happen around tables.
Okay, feeding the 5,000 was the next one we talked about. And trying to figure out the posture of Christ in that, and really the posture of the little boy whose openness helped to facilitate that miracle. So Jesus feeds 5,000. Jesus has been preaching all day. They're in the countryside. The disciples say, hey, these people need food. And Jesus is like, well,
feed them.
Get them some food. And they're like, what? They're looking at the logistical issues,
right?
Which is what we tend to do. The logistics of feeding people always tends to overwhelm us. It never overwhelms Jesus. And he's like, what do you got? This is a paraphrase, the Carl Carty paraphrase.
Okay.
He's like, what do you got? And you're like, well, we got this one kid. He's got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Jesus said, I can work with that. And really what he was saying he can work with was the openness of this little kid to say, hey, this is what I've got. And I offer it. I'm open with what I have. And then the story goes, Jesus took that little bit of food, that lunch for one, and broke it and blessed it and multiplied it so that it became food for 5,000 with 12 basketfuls of leftovers.
Right.
Collected after everyone had ate their fill.
Yeah.
Beautiful story.
It is.
So it's the principle here is being open to share what you have, to create the atmosphere and environment for God to bless it and break it and multiply it and use it to feed people. I think about my friends Joy and Jerry Hamrick. Jerry just recently went to be with the Lord, and he and his wife helped me with the youth group where I was a youth pastor 25, 30 years ago when we lived in North Carolina, helping to plan a church.
You were the MUTH.
Yeah, MUTH, music
pastor.
And youth.
Shout out to all the MUTH pastors out there.
Y'all keep going. Don't ever be discouraged. 2 jobs, 1 salary.
One half great. Salary, probably.
Yeah. 2 full-time jobs, 1 part-time salary.
Right.
But I was the youth minister, and I was responsible for being the youth pastor for Joy and Jerry's kids and a bunch of everybody else's kids. And they were always the people that were like, hey, if you want to meet at our house, the answer is yes.
Right.
They were always easy with the yes. They never were like, oh, well, we're too busy, or the house, we hadn't cleaned it up yet, and y'all can't come. Never that. It was like, y'all get over here. And I'm talking 7 days a week. I would bet you someone was in their home and they were actively loving on and ministering to people, just being open with what they had. And I think transformed a whole generation of kids, their kids and their kids' friends. And me included. I saw her not too long ago, and I got to thank her for the impact that she made on me by just living in a way that said, I'm open with everything I've got. And then you reminded me of a story where you saw Jerry, her husband, in the grocery store one day, and he had like $500 worth of ground chuck in his shopping cart. And you were like, what are you going to do with all this meat? And he's like, oh, we're just going to cook burgers for the kids tonight.
Yeah, feeding the youth.
And just feeding people and saying, hey, not worrying so much about where this is going to come from, but being open with what they had and believing that God would provide for the need,
right?
Through their openness, through their faith. And man,
it was beautiful.
Be open with what you have.
It was beautiful to see them because their house did not grow as the youth group grew. I noticed that. And then the other thing is I never noticed I can't remember anything about their home, but what I do remember is the way they made me feel. So I can't remember the wallpaper, or the decor, or where the bathroom was, anything like that. I do remember how they made me feel. So none of the things that we think might matter really matter. So, okay, third thing, dinner with Martha and Mary. If you don't know the story, Jesus has dinner at Martha and Mary's house. They're sisters, and Martha is busy preparing and doing all the things, and Mary is sitting at Jesus's feet, and Martha's kind of annoyed, which I kind of get this. I can feel this sometimes when you're getting ready for something, and then somebody's kind of being lackadaisical, and you're like, come on, man.
Are you Martha and I'm Mary?
No, I wasn't talking. I wasn't thinking about you. I was thinking
about
our 4 party crashers that live in the house.
Okay.
But the idea here,
they're sitting at the feet of Fortnite.
Right. And so Jesus kind of corrects Martha and says, hey, he doesn't say what you're doing is bad, but he says what Mary is doing is better. She chose the greater thing. And I think the idea here is that we have to not let the urgent override the important. So urgent things when you're having people in your home are, is the house clean? Do I have all the ingredients I need for my meal? Am I preparing? And then even after, like, do I need to do dishes right now so they're not sitting up later? Because for me, this is a struggle that I have because it is difficult for me to be where I am at that moment. I'm always thinking like of the next step. And so if I'm sitting having dinner with someone, it's oftentimes hard for me to just be present in the moment. And all the time when I look at Jesus in the Bible, I never thought he seemed hurried or he seemed like he was thinking about what was next. He was actually just thinking about what he was doing and who he was with right then. And I want to be like that. Yeah. And I think people feel seen and they feel ministered to and they feel important when you have that kind of posture. So it's not that those other things aren't important. They are, but they seem more urgent. And sometimes we can miss the important when we focus on what's urgent.
Last one, the meal at Emmaus. And I'm talking about my favorite Bible story.
Favorite story. Let's hear it.
Okay. So the story goes, Jesus is risen from the dead. These two people are walking down the street. Could be husband and wife. We're not sure. We only know that the husband is named Clopas.
I like that name.
I like Clopas. And then they go home to the same place. So maybe they do live together. Maybe it was husband and wife. But Clopas, maybe and his wife are walking down the road and they encounter Jesus, but Jesus' identity is concealed from them. And Jesus asks them, hey, what's going on? And Clopas is kind of incredulous. He's like, wait a minute, have you not been in Jerusalem? Have you not heard? They killed Jesus. And he goes on this kind of little mini thing. He's like, dude, check in, catch up. This is a big deal. And then Jesus kind of responds by saying, well, don't you know all this stuff was supposed to happen? And he starts at the beginning and goes on. He's talking about himself, but he sort of talks about the prophets and everything that was supposed to happen. And Clopas and his wife are like, yeah, this guy's got it together. You know what I mean? Yeah. They obviously want to listen to what he has to say. They're at this point where they're going to go to their home. And Jesus pretends like he's going to keep going, which I like that because that's the moment that created the atmosphere for a miracle for them. And they didn't even know it, but hospitality compelled them to say, no, don't go on. Come home with us. One translation of the Bible says they strongly urged him, no, come to our house. And then the next scene in the story is they're sitting at a table, around a table, and Jesus breaks bread and gives it to them. And he reveals himself to them. His identity is revealed. And the moment they see it, who he is, he vanishes. It's awesome. Every time I hear that story, I feel like a little kid. And the adult in me wants to qualify it or explain it away. But the childlike faith in me wants to be like, no, you invite Jesus in and he'll reveal himself to you. So the principle in that story is Jesus wants to be invited in. And when we humble ourselves enough to invite him in to every meal that we have, when you invite your neighbors over, say a little prayer. Jesus, you're invited in. When you invite your coworkers over, your friends, Jesus, you're invited in. And when he RSVPs to your invitation, that's when the atmosphere for miracles and beautiful things can happen. And the Bible says that when Jesus disappeared, they talked to each other and they said, were we not on fire with his presence? Were we not like burning up to be around him? Mm-hmm. And I think the answer was yes, they were. It's kind of a rhetorical question. Mm-hmm. And I think when we invite Jesus into these atmospheres and environments, that hospitality compels us to create. When we invite Jesus into these environments and we say, Lord, be present at our table, he can ignite the atmosphere with miracle power that you and I can't conjure. You can't cook enough good food. Mm-hmm. I can't be funny enough to do that. But the presence of Jesus is transformative. And so that invitational thing, just remembering Jesus wants to be invited to this meal. And when we invite him in, it makes all the difference.
It does. It does. So recap for us, babe, those 4 things we just talked about.
Okay. Miracles happen around tables.
Right.
Be open with what you have and be willing to share it. Third thing, don't let the urgent override the important. And Jesus wants to be invited in. So those are the 4 things. Mm-hmm. Many stories kind of say the same thing. What do they all say about our marriages? Where do we find ourselves in all of this?
Right. I think we need to talk about a meal that we all have heard of, but that we didn't mention yet. And that's the Last Supper. And that's the last meal that Jesus had with his disciples in the upper room before he was crucified. And so he gathered around a table with his disciples. And we don't know a lot about it. We obviously know he had bread and wine, but we don't know anything else, like what else was served.
Probably hummus.
Probably some hummus, some olives. Hummus. Maybe olives. We don't know how it tasted. We don't know how much it was available. Did they have a lot? Did they have a little? We don't know anything about their schedules, what they did that day. Were they exhausted when they came into the room that night? We don't even know what the room looked like. Was it neat and tidy? Did someone really make sure it looked okay? Was it decorated really well? Or did somebody like really slack on the decor in the room? We don't know anything about that because the only thing that mattered was Jesus and his presence. And the interesting thing about that is that we still celebrate that today. Everyone who calls themselves a Christian still recognizes that meal, and we celebrate it today as communion, the Lord's Supper, Lord's table. We call it different things, but we're celebrating that. But it represents an actual meal. And I think I forget that sometimes because we're usually sitting in chairs facing the front where someone's on stage, mm-hmm. and we're all side by side. We're not around a table when we celebrate it. But that's where it happened. So what if, to answer your question, as a couple, we started gathering around our tables with that mindset? That every time we do, that we're celebrating Jesus, his life, his death, his resurrection, his presence at our table, and the hope, reminding our own hearts of the hope that he offers us, and then sharing that same hope with everybody else who's at our table.
Yeah.
That's what I think we need to do.
That's a good word for married people. Mm-hmm. And for anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm hungry.
Maybe we should eat.
I could eat.
Yeah, I could eat.
When we do, let's put it into practice.
Let's do it.
Thanks to everybody. That's a good stopping point.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. If you want to stay up with us, like where we're going to be speaking, where we're going to be going, if you want to connect with us through email, stuff like that, the best place is carlandheather.com. That's where you can find us. Check it out. You don't want to miss it.
Yeah. And next week, we've got something special coming up.
Special musical guest next week. It's going to be great. Shaylee Simeone is going to join us. Check it out.
We'll see you next week.
All right. Together on Purpose.
Together on Purpose.
It's Carl and Heather.